The smile. It started a while ago. I can't really remember when. Only how. One day I was walking through the park on my way home when I felt someone watching me. Looking around, I couldn't see anyone, but I felt their gaze. Someone was following me. I could hear them from time to time. A rustle in the bushes here, some twigs snapping there. You might call me paranoid. I'm not. Every single time I stopped, the noises went silent, and they only started up again as I kept walking. So this wasn't just mere coincidence. I started to become more and more nervous. This goddamn gaze buried itself into my back like a knife. Why was this person hiding? I didn't stay to find out. I had to get out of there, or else I might find myself with more than just a gaze stabbing my back. I ran as fast as I could. My lungs were bursting. My heart pounded like a sledgehammer. The adrenaline rushed through my veins and gave me a speed and endurance I never thought I had. It still wasn't enough. No matter how fast I ran, the noises kept up with me. How could someone rushing through thick bushes easily keep up with me when I was running on the flat walkway? I had to get out of the park to my house right across the street. If I was fast enough, I could just lock the door and hide. I crossed the street like a hunted animal, barely being missed by a Chevy speeding down the road. Hastily jamming my keys into the lock, I took a quick glance over my shoulder. It seemed like I had outrun the pursuer. At least, there was none I could see who had followed me to the side of the road. The lock clicked, and I bursted into the safety of my home. I threw the door into the angles and locked it tight, before sinking to the floor, exasperated. Cold air filled my lungs, and my heart slowly calmed down. A deep silence surrounded me. No cars on the street, no footsteps or banging on the door. Only the blood rushing through my veins and my trembling breath. After a few minutes, I came back to my senses, and it hit me. Had the pursuers seen where I lived? Even though they hadn't been there when I had glimpsed over my shoulder, they still could have rushed out of the park before I had closed the door. The thought of them roaming around the street or just standing outside the house waiting drove me crazy. I had to be sure. I had to peek through the spy hole. That's when I saw it for the first time. 2 eyes inside the bushes right at the park's entrance. Lidless, red eyes with a wide iris stared at me. Directly at me. Not just at my house or my door. Oh no. They knew I was right behind the door looking at them. Who, or better whatever was hiding in these bushes, smiled at me. I couldn't see the rest of its face, but I could see it in these horrible eyes. They had an almost childlike glee. We looked at each other for I don't know how long. Then suddenly, the 2 red orbs just disappeared. This must have been my eyes tricking me. A hallucination caused by the stress of the chase. I kept telling myself that. Still, I couldn't forget these giant gleeful eyes. It took hours until I fell asleep. And when the fatigue finally overwhelmed me, I had horrible nightmares. In my dream, I was in the kitchen, working on something when I heard a noise outside and looked up. It hit me like cold air on a December's night. They were pressed against the window, staring at me. Big, red, lidless eyes gleaming with incomprehensible joy. The moment I recognized them, they just floated through the window and slowly came at me. A puffing noise filled the room. The eyes had no face, it was just them, floating in the air, separate from everything else. But I knew the puffing came from them. I ran upstairs and hid in my closet. The noise became louder and louder as they followed me upstairs. They entered my bedroom. Through the cracks in my closet door, I was able to observe them. They were looking for me. Under the bed, the sheet, everywhere. The puffing noise crawled right into my head. I wanted to close my eyes and cover my ears, just shut out everything, but I was unable to move. The eyes came closer to my hideout by the second. They floated right in front of my closet and looked back at me through the crack in the door. The breathing was so loud I felt my head was going to explode. A noise escaped my mouth. I screamed. I screamed louder than ever before. My screams got swallowed by the noises filling my head. I was deaf. The puffing surrounded me like a tornado. The eyes attempted to come closer and then, thank God, I finally woke up. I laid in my bed, screaming like I did in my dream. It took me a few seconds to recognize my surroundings and to realize I was back in reality. It had been just a dream. Feeling relieved, I tried to calm down. But then, my heart almost stopped. I heard a faint puffing. It came from the foot of my bed. A deep, slow sound. Breathe in, breathe out. I couldn't stop myself. I had to see it. Had to see the face these eyes were part of. So I slowly turned my head. It was standing right at the end of my bed and stared at me. Long, wild hairs fell from its head. Its skin was pale as candle wax. The two giant eyes laid in deep holes, seemingly buried into the creature's skull, and below them its mouth loomed in the darkness. It was almost too big for its face, without any real lips. And I'd been right. It was smiling. The corner of its mouth was stretched into a giant maniacal grin from one side of the face to the other. My blood froze. Unable to move, I just laid there, looked at it and waited. Waited for it to come and get me. An hour passed, then another one. It just stood there staring at me, smiling and puffing. I couldn't turn my eyes away, or even blink. After a while, I realized I was imitating its breathing rhythm. Breathe in, breathe out, deep and slow. Combined with this unbreaking stare, it was hypnotizing. Maybe that was the reason it didn't get any closer. After a few hours, the dawn rose, and as suddenly as it had begun, the puffing stopped and the creature was gone. Just gone in the blink of an eye. At first, I thought it might have been a dream or a phantasm brought on by too much work. But if it had only been a dream, why was I so fatigued? I could barely get my work done and fell asleep at my desk multiple times. And when I came home that day, I fell on my bed and fell asleep in mere seconds. This smile, this unforgettable smile followed me into my dreams again. I was staring at a mirror. When I bowed down to wash my face, the breathing started. I bolted upright and looked right at it in the mirror. It was still my body, only that instead of my face, its face was now on top of it. A weird caricature of myself was looking at me, breathing heavily. I woke up again, knowing what would await me in the real world. It was standing at the foot of my bed again, just staring at me and breathing. This time the fatigue was too much. My body felt so heavy. I wasn't able to grasp a single thought. My brain was a grey ocean of tiredness that screamed for a break. So, even though this thing was in my room, I couldn't stop my eyelids from falling down. It was just for a brief moment, a short pause, but the puffing immediately became louder. The moment my eyes opened up again, it stood right next to the side of my bed, staring down at me. I looked back at it and its breath became normal again. No words were necessary. I understood. It wanted me to look at it. If I'd fail, it'd take me, and only God himself knew what would happen then. This time it wasn't hypnotizing. No calming breath, no imitation. All I could focus on was to keep my eyes open at all costs. I knew if I'd close them again, there wouldn't be another chance. Then the smile would do something I didn't even dare to imagine. It was a desperate fight to be spared. A fight that after being awake for over 40 hours would eventually be lost. My consciousness began to fade. The borders of my vision blurred until everything that was left was the smile. The smile, gleeful, happy, and these lidless eyes sparkling with joy. What was the reason for this bright smile? Why was this thing so happy? These two questions were the only thing I could think of. They circled around my mind over and over while I lost all feeling of time. After what felt like an eternity, the first birds chirped outside the window, and dawn came to release me. It was gone in the blink of an eye, just like the previous night. The moment the stare was broken, I collapsed onto my bed and fell asleep. In my dreams, the smile hunted me through the house, giggling like a little child. When I woke up, it was almost night. I had slept the whole day, but was barely rested. The nightmares had taken too much of my energy. The remaining few hours I tried to get some rest, at least doze a bit. It was no use. Knowing the smile would come for me again this night made me unable to calm myself. I sat on my sofa and watched the sun go down. The faint noise of the smile puffing stuck in my head like a needle I couldn't pull out. With every inch the sun came closer to vanishing behind the horizon, the puffing became louder. The smile was coming. With the last rays of the day gone, it materialized right in front of me, and the game began again. I barely lasted the night. When the smile was gone, I collapsed again and was haunted by terrible nightmares. And so the circle continued. Nightmares, waking up, waiting for the smile, desperately trying to stay awake, collapse. again and again, day after day, week after week. I thought about running away, but getting somewhere else would have cost me too much precious sleep time, so I just endured every day. And then, suddenly everything changed. One day, after the night ended, I didn't collapse. My stomach was being devoured by an endless hunger. A few days ago, I'd eaten the last remaining food in my house. I hadn't even thought about going out to get new food. Now the hunger was so big, I couldn't go to sleep. I was losing time. Time that could make the difference between life and death. So for the first time since all of this had started, I went outside. It was still pretty dark. The sun just started to slowly crawl above the horizon. I walked through the park, the place where it had all begun. After a few minutes, another person appeared in the distance and quickly came closer. It was a young woman, an early bird jogging in the park. She was only a few feet away when she suddenly stopped. Staring at me, she began to stutter. Her hands were trembling and slowly she took a step back. I stared right back at her, confused by what I saw. A weird aura emanated from her body. Dark clouds wavering around her like heated air. A little shred of them detached from the rest and wavered in my direction. It danced in the air, a playful little thing. Eerily, something about its movement made me happy. It was a cheerful little dance, just for me. I came closer until the little cloud was dancing right in front of my nose. I watched its movement for a little while and then breathed it in. The tiny thing got sucked into my nose and my whole world exploded. It stimulated all my senses. Its smell was the sweetest I ever smelled. A soft tickle warmed my skin and my vision became clearer. It tasted unlike anything I'd ever tasted before, and every noise became soft and clear. Unwittingly, my lips formed a big smile. The woman gasped and stumbled a few steps back. The clouds around her body grew bigger as she panically tried to get away from me. The moment of joy ended as abruptly as it had started. Immediately my body, my mind, everything inside of me screamed for more. I needed more, much more, as much as I could get. I reached out for the woman's cloud. Her expression turned into one of sheer horror and she sprinted away. I pursued her and breathed in every little shred I could grasp. It revitalized me, filled me with energy I'd never felt before. She was running as fast as she could, screaming at the top of her lungs. With every scream, more clouds gushed out of her. I picked every single one out of the air and devoured it. I chased her through the park until we finally reached the exit, and she escaped through it. God, I never had that much fun in my entire life. I felt newborn, so full of energy, so full of life. I had slept my whole life and I finally woken up. There was no need to eat anymore, no need to sleep. Happy, I left the park and went home. I was curious what had startled the lady. My appearance seemed to have frightened her. So I looked into the mirror for the first time since all of this had started. I thought I was dreaming again for a moment. The smile's face looked back at me. It was right there on top of my body with its gleeful eyes. Yet something was off. It didn't exactly smile, it just smirked a bit. That's when I realized that this was my own face I was looking at. The sleepless nights had changed me. My hair was falling from my head in a wild manner. My eyes were red, the iris only little black holes in a sea of scarlet. I was skinny and dried out. My pale, grey skin was stretched over the bones of my face, which made my lips strangely bigger. Still, even if I looked like a dying man, I felt more alive than ever. The smile wouldn't get me this night. This thought made me laugh, a laughter of relief and freedom. It was the beautiful, energizing absence of fear, which gave me new life. By the time the sun went down, I was pumped and looked forward to show the smile my new self. The light disappeared, but this time there was no puffing. The smile just manifested in front of me. It was confused, I could tell. The smile was a bit off and its eyes had lost their glimmer. Its confusion didn't last for long. It stared at me and grinned. I'd never seen this sort of smile before. It was different, not full of joy, no, it was almost as if it was proud. Somehow this made me happy, and I smiled back. We spent the rest of the night smiling at each other. When dawn arrived, it disappeared as always. I knew what I had to do. It would take a while until the sun would crawl over the horizon and illuminate the world. Plenty of time. I went into the park and hid in the bushes this time. It didn't take long until someone came along. An old man and his dog. The animal was the first one who sensed my presence. It looked around, shaking and whimpering with its tail between the legs. The man felt the fear of his dog and looked around. Clouds started to appear around him. Only small and faint ones, yet I could smell their seductive scent. The two continued their walk and I followed them with a lot of noise. Every one of my movements made the leaves around me shake, and every few steps a twig cracked under my feet. The man stopped again to look around. His dog pressed against him and whimpered. The little thing begged its beloved master to leave. His clouds became thicker. I breathed in, and a few of them detached from his body and danced into my nose. Oh, that's the stuff. This beautiful life elixir. I followed them until they left the park. Both almost ran towards the exit when it finally appeared. Still hiding inside the bushes, I chased them and grabbed big chunks of the wonderful clouds. After they were gone, I was barely satisfied. Sadly, the sun was finally up and cast away the anxiety and fear darkness brings into people's hearts. The park filled with people, but they were too light-hearted, too confident as long as there was the light of day around them. So I went home and waited for the smile. The previous night repeated. The puffing was gone, while its eyes and smile were full of pride and a spark of love. The next morning, I went out again to collect more clouds. I didn't even have to worry about hunger or fatigue anymore. All I needed was them. This continued day after day, for a whole week. The last night of the week, something changed. The smile wasn't just standing there. It slowly floated towards the door of my house, still looking at me, still smiling. I followed. We reached the door and the smile opened it. It nodded at me and, for the first time, looked away. It left my house and went into the park. I understood. This wasn't my home anymore. My life had changed. I now saw the world with other eyes. I stepped into the night and we vanished. A long time has passed since then, and my life has become more beautiful than I could have ever dreamed of. Something you couldn't imagine even in your wildest dreams. When the sun is up, I hide inside the bushes and share my smile with the others of my kind. We connect to each other and lose ourselves in our joy. When the night comes, we go out and look for others to share our smile with. Like the young boy whose bed I'm standing at this very moment. He saw me earlier this day. His body is shivering and he's rolling around. He must have wonderful nightmares of me. Soon he'll understand. Soon he'll feel it, live it. If not, well, he'll end up with us in the bushes one way or another. Hush now, he's waking up. Time to put on my nicest smile.